Thanks everybody for still being here. I think I need some hyperbaric oxygen from my colleague who was speaking an hour ago. We have in such a fabulous place here in Bavaria. We have the mountains, we have beautiful sky, we have beer, we have beautiful politicians. Actually, we don't have diseases. We don't have dangerous diseases here. After this day, I have the impression we don't have serious problems at all here. Nevertheless, these politicians coming together here in Elmau some days ago draw very important conclusions for the prevention of future outbreaks. They said we must draw lessons from this Ebola epidemic in the future. And they said we commit to preventing future outbreaks from becoming epidemics. Actually, then they flew away, everybody, and they didn't tell us how we should do that. So let me fill in here and give you an impression from a virologist's point of view. What are the lessons learned from Ebola, and what could we do to prevent future epidemics? To find out what the lessons learned are, we have to go back far away from here and from beautiful Elmau, which is seen here, to a place in West Africa, which used to be one of the most dangerous places in the world. There in West Africa, in Guinea, in southern Guinea, is a little village called Meliandou. And in this little village, last Christmas, a small boy from 1 year old, his name was Emile, fell ill with an unknown disease. And within several weeks, his mother, his grandmother, his sister, and many more people in this little village, that's actually the village from the top, they died. Nobody knew why, and you know, of course, this was the beginning of a major outbreak of Ebola. A year later, the situation was that we had more than 25,000 infected, and half of them died from Ebola in these three countries. At the moment now, we still have an epidemic, even if it's not in the news anymore, actually, which is colored in green here. In these regions, the epidemic is still active, and the problem is not yet over, but I think it will be over soon, actually. So how can such a small virus, such a small bug, be able to bring death, disease, devastation, social riots, and hunger and other problems to these countries in such a short time? From a virologist's point of view, this is really an amazing organism. It has no brains, it has no sensory organs. It's one of the most primitive living forms on Earth, and it causes these serious problems to what we call the crown of creation. The way the virus is doing that, and viruses in general are doing that, is very simple. They are extremely simple, and that's the clue to their success. Because they are so simple, they can be fast. When they infect a cell, they replicate immediately, and within a few hours produce 10,000 of new viruses. Here in this picture, you see in yellow the cell which is infected, and the blue things here, these are the Ebola viruses coming out of an infected cell. The second thing is the Ebola virus is extremely flexible. It can infect almost every cell of the human body, and it can not only infect humans, it infects almost every animal on this planet. So it's not selective in what it's doing. But being fast and flexible is only part of the solution to the success. This virus also had a very powerful helper when it came to West Africa. And in recent outbreaks, until the actual outbreak, there were only very small epidemics of Ebola in Central Africa. Usually we had 300 to 500 patients maximum, and they burned out from itself. So nothing had to happen. They were contained very quickly. They didn't go further. But then human greed came into play. And there's a greed for timber, of course, in the rainforests, for gold and for diamonds. And therefore, humans paved logging roads like these into the rainforest, and they expelled these nice little animals from their natural habitat, and these nice little mice went west. Actually, these are bats, of course. And the bats went from Central Africa to West Africa already 20 years ago, as we know now. We didn't recognize before, but they in fact went there a long time ago before the actual outbreak happened. And they brought a dangerous payload. This was the Ebola virus with them. When it arrived in West Africa, the medical doctors there and the local healers were absolutely unaware of Ebola, of course. They knew perhaps Lassa fever. Lassa fever is another fever which is similar to Ebola, but less infectious, less dangerous. So many of them died, many of the doctors died. One of them, who is very famous, is Sheikh Umar Khan. He was the only and the very renowned Lassa fever specialist in Sierra Leone, and he was one of the first victims of the actual outbreak. Before he died, he had really called the world for help for months and months, but the world didn't listen. In contrast, the World Health Organization, this is the local representative of the World Health Organization in Guinea by that time. The World Health Organization, they said this is no problem. They denied the problem more or less, and they had in focus their own situation, their own reputation, and possible economic losses for their country. Oops, I didn't do that. So it took several months until the Director General of the WHO, Margaret Chan, who you see here, declared this Ebola outbreak a worldwide health emergency. By that time, thousands of people were already dead. And the world, how did it react to this call for help? It was thinking of its own safety first. So the problem was the world was alarmed to help, but what happened was the world was thinking about its own safety, especially the Western civilized countries, the high technology countries. This was a very big problem in the beginning because the regular flights were stopped to that region, and therefore it was extremely difficult to get out infected aid workers from that part of the world because they couldn't fly back. And so it was increasingly difficult to get helpers to go there and help because the situation was exaggerating. Germany was trying to help. They gave their best. Actually, they did it with Teutonic thoroughness. And therefore, they constructed at first place an airplane, which is absolutely new. This is an airplane called Robert Koch for people who are infected with highly contagious agents, which are airborne, fly through the air and infect other people. And at the same time, it's an intensive care unit. So it's the first intensive care unit which can handle people who have airborne viruses and also fly at the same time. I said patients, that's not really true. The maximum number of passengers of this Airbus A340 is 1. It's just for one patient. It costs more than 20 million euros, and it was never transporting a single patient because it took much too long to construct and invent this. Also, the German Ebola Treatment Center, which was inaugurated on December 23, never treated a single patient because it was much too late. But it has perfectly running water, very good electricity, water supply, a storm-proof roof, and it has a concrete pavement. Now it will be deconstructed, most likely. Never treated a single patient. Lessons learned, of course, you can imagine, this was just a short impression. There will be books written about the lessons learned from this failure of the international humanity. There are many articles which have been written already for those who are interested. This is one article which appeared in German and English, and for those who are interested, I can email it for you. But for this little talk, I bring it down to 3 issues which we found out how an epidemic should be prevented in the future. It's just 3 major issues which are important. Number 1 is communication. Communication means two-way communication. One thing is that of course the people who live in the endangered regions of the world, they have to know what to do against these diseases. They have to know these diseases which come from animals or from somewhere in the rainforest. And the other way is as equally important, because we, the helpers, have to know about the special habits of these people living there, about their ethnic habits, about their religion, because our intervention, of course, must fit to their kind of seeing the world. And actually, both parts of communication were desperately missing in this outbreak in West Africa. Number 2 is timing. Not only for conferences, timing is extremely critical. In this part of the world, in this case, where it goes out to stop outbreaks, it's important to stop it as early as possible. You have to stop the outbreak really at the very beginning, because that's the moment when you can do what we call stamping out, like a cigarette in a wood which is glimmering. If you stamp it out, you prevent perhaps a wildfire. And we can do the same thing, of course, with viruses if we find them early enough. So for timing, it's necessary to have a detection system in place which is able to really detect these viruses, these new agents, perhaps bacteria or other things, as early as possible. Very difficult, of course, under rural conditions. Number 3 is command. You need people to go there who are trained to go there. It's impossible to send people in an outbreak region who don't know what they are doing. You cannot train them in the short time you have, so you have to train them beforehand. And you need an international strategic command to coordinate all the efforts. This was not done in this case. The WHO failed to do that, actually. In a way, trying to stop an epidemic under rural conditions is a kind of a military operation. So command is the real word here. We need communication, timing, and command, and how to translate that into practical measures. I give you our plan how we want to do that, and actually this plan it's very small on the right side here. It's from 2005. It's an old proposal of mine. It's called the Early Outbreak Detection and Response System. The 3 elements are education and communication. I explained why. The second element is the early outbreak detection. I will go into this in a minute a little bit more in detail. And the last element is the international response units, the people who go in there. I proposed that a long time ago. Ban Ki-moon from the United Nations called these guys now the white coat troops. So white coat troops who can send in instead of the blue helmet troops. I will not elaborate on all this, but just show you one of our projects about early outbreak detection, because this is more technically and it fits a little bit into the digital world. Why do we need early outbreak detection? Humankind's last line of defense, the last line of the defense of us humans, lies really in the underdeveloped world. Why? Because we humans as a species, we conquered every enemy on the planet. We conquered the saber-toothed tiger, the big bears. We have no wolves in the forests anymore. Even the Neanderthaler was extinct by humans, by Homo sapiens. But we still are conquering against microorganisms. These are the last natural enemies we have on this planet, actually. And where do they come from? They now come from the animal region. Every important infectious disease which emerged in the last years effectively came from animals. Perhaps you remember SARS in 2003. This is the severe acute respiratory syndrome. As some of you might remember, this broke out in southern China and Hong Kong, and there was a terrible satellite outbreak in Toronto in Canada. And the guy who brought it to humans is this one. It's a civet, a little animal which was eaten by Chinese in southern China, in the Guangdong region, and actually transferred the virus to humans. Ebola, everybody knows now what Ebola is. I don't have to explain that. This came, of course, from bats, from fruit bats in Central Africa. AIDS is another new plague. This came, as not so many people know, actually from chimpanzee. Chimpanzee are eaten in Africa as a delicacy. They call it bushmeat. And in the 1940s, the AIDS virus jumped over from chimpanzee to humans, and that's why we have the disease here now. The latest example, perhaps you know it from the news, is called MERS. It's the Middle East respiratory syndrome. It's a little bit similar to SARS. People get respiratory problems. Between 10 to 40% die. It came from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and now we have a satellite outbreak in southern Korea, which is quite serious. And this MERS came from dromedaria. So all these come from animals, jump over to humans, and of course the place where this happened is somewhere in the underdeveloped world. Our dogs and cats, they don't have these dangerous bugs in them. So what we have to do is we detect them early when they show up somewhere in the underdeveloped country. And this is the project we are following right now. I call it the incredibly shrinking lab. That's how a lab looks like now. That's a typical lab of a big hospital. It's a very big thing. This small thing here is everything we need to diagnose new infectious diseases in the field. We need a microscope, and we need this red thing, which is a molecular analyzer, actually the analyzer we use in Africa now. These two things, they will even shrink more, and in very near future, we heard about this already today, there will be labs on a chip. We will have a lab on a chip which has the size of this, size of a little box, where you can do all the diagnostics which is necessary. We don't implant it under the skin yet, but we have a little box which we want to give to the doctors in the field and also to the natural healers in the field. So for detecting new viruses, new infectious agents coming out somewhere in the wild, we need only this, a smartphone, and of course this, a drop of blood which everybody can take. That's how the system works. We have an analyzer which analyzes nucleic acids. That's the genetic information of the viruses, bacteria, and so on. And at the same time analyzes some standard parameters from the laboratory, like electrolytes or enzymes. These are very important for the people working there because they can help to treat better their own patients. So we have a two-way, a win-win situation. It's good for us to know early about new diseases, and it's good for the people who use it because they can treat their patients in everyday life better. And then we have an internal algorithm checking if there is a probability for an unknown pathogen. That's very easy. That's a computational part, which is not very complicated. And if this says yes, then we send information over the internet out to the international community, give a warning, and can send in a SWAT team to check what's going on. This is not only humanitarian. The shrinking lab has also possibilities for important future markets. As you know, point-of-care testing in hospitals is a very important issue. Now in the hospitals, they don't want to have only the big laboratories. At one place, they want to have decentralized laboratories on the wards directly where the patients are. That's point-of-care testing. Number two is home health care, a very important issue. Other speakers were talking about that today already. This means that when elderly people or people who do not want to go to the doctor or cannot really move, they are treated at home, then we can make it possible that also the diagnosis, the blood diagnosis is taken at home, is done at home. So this is what we call home health care for blood sugar and these things. And of course, the complete new area of wellness and prevention. Prevention is something very serious, especially for the insurance companies. Here it's also impossible to have small devices who can detect and analyze blood everywhere. So this is our vision. We want an early outbreak detection network where we can link together all these smart doctors and courageous people in the villages who try to help people who are sick. And with the help of a little help from our friends from the digital community, we hope that we can uplink this information to some kind of a Pan-African disease center where the information goes together. So that next time when these guys call for help, the world hopefully will be listening. Thank you very much.